Talk about production value. Thank you, Captain Blazy, for yet again another sick intro. This looks so cool. Like, oh my goodness. Hello, everybody. It's me, Sladen. After a couple of months of work, I have finally finished the updated version of the Wardogs concept faction for Helldivers. I am so glad that I've your support for this faction is so nice. This is incredible. I'm still stunned by how nice everyone was, and I hope you will all enjoy this more improved version. I feel like I've grown a lot more compared to my last video, editing wise, art wise, in just I feel like this is just the better version of that last one. I've actually understood how the game works a lot more. So the idea of a fourth faction is up there for things in Helldivers that probably will never happen. Like right up there with like a stealth war bond, it just isn't happening. I'm not saying that we need a new faction. I honestly think that at this moment, I don't see it working. Helldivers, all the current factions that we have fill all the roles that are needed, and I think instead of creating a whole new faction, they should focus on making the already existing ones nicer and cooler. This is just all been just a little project. It's allowing me to understand the game more. It allows me to create rules to follow in this little project. It's really nice. It helps me understand just game design a lot nicer. It's just a little hobby, and I've had a lot of fun with it. Quick little recap of the faction for those new to my channel and just this whole project in general. This faction is made up of two groups: dissident rebels and alien wildlife. The rebels have chosen to fight against Super Earth due to their treatment to their soldiers and people. The total amount of rebels is around 20 to 25, maybe 18% of the total population of humanity in Helldivers, but a common agreement is that it's in the trillions. So even if we take it to its lowest possibility, which is around like 4 trillion, we're talking around at least a good couple 100 million, maybe even 1 trillion rebels, which isn't anything to scoff at. That's incredible. Super Earth beats rebels in numbers and supplies, so brute force and their sheer numbers won't win them this war. The remaining rebels leave and explore the galaxy, gathering different species to help give them the edge in the war for their species. This faction is referred to as the Wardogs. We'll start off with the enemies, moving on to new environments and missions, and some other little tidbits. I've been at work, guys. The Grunts have received some upgrades with having a lot more variety, and they're all filling different roles, because I felt that just having them be prisoners isn't a terrible idea, but it seems a little uncreative having it only be them. I feel like this faction could have a lot of variety to it because it's humanity. So starting off, we're going with a piece of alien wildlife. The Tree Hugger, which is the weakest and most expendable out of the whole faction, is an alien species that has evolved similarly to orangutans and other monkeys. It has an armor value of unarmored 1 with a light chest. This guy is there to come in droves and throw hands with the player, being used to help create opportunities for the other enemies. On some rare occasions, when throwing a red stratagem ball, they can throw it back in the player's general area. Not directly at you, but just around like a 10-meter radius of you. So it still gives the player time to run away once they notice it, but if you don't, you're cooked. They come from a planet that is teeming with dangerous predators, spending most of their lives in trees. This planet is huge in size, allowing there to be a lot more of them. The rebels of the faction abducted a large amount of these guys because they were the only species they could capture without losing too many resources and men. This guy is very easy, but with the increase in difficulty, say past 6, a more dangerous variant can spawn in. For every 15 to 20 tree huggers is an armed tree hugger. Covered in grenade bandoliers, it will come charging at the player, screaming and hollering. You'll need to dispatch it a good distance away from you and other players, or you'll be caught in the explosion. I imagine that the grenades are just standard frag grenades, as well as maybe an incendiary one on occasion. On colony maps, and those with large trees, these guys will be hanging off large branches, signs, and streetlights. They will come down once shot at or are aware of the player's position. Next are prisoners. These guys have an armor value of unarmored 1 and light for their hard helmets. In lore, large riots broke out on different planets. Normally, Super Earth would silence them by drowning out their chance for change with buckshot and slugs. After taking great losses from the other three enemy sides and their dwindling resources, Super Earth saw that keeping these dissidents alive could be beneficial, so for all the captured rebels were taken to planets designed to be prisons, nowhere to go if they broke out. So the rebels come and break them out, only really to have them do the more dangerous jobs that they don't want to do, like protecting high volatile equipment or going to a lot more dangerous areas. Wreckers are another melee grunt. However, they are armed with sledgehammers and pickaxes, so they have slightly longer range. These guys can also throw homemade nail bombs. They will scream profanities like, "The system failed us," and "They're liars," and other lovely little things to just thumbs down Super Earth. The Breacher is covered in police level riot gear, giving them an armor value of light penetration. These guys carry on ballistic shields and semi-automatic shotguns. Their shield has an armor pen of medium, so they can take a little bit more damage. But similarly to hive guards on the bug front, all you need to do is get behind the shield. But you're going to want to be careful to keep your distance, because you don't want to get hit with their shotgun. They'll attack you from close to mid-range, just like a normal shotgun. A variant in them are the jockeys, who are almost identical except they drop their shield, so they can now ride on top of a piece of alien wildlife, and I'll talk about that later. The next are recruits. These guys are made up of primarily civilians who have defected from Super Earth, either because they believe in the cause, for change, and freedom, or they don't like the increase in their super taxes. These guys are barely any better than grunts. They are armed with just the base essentials, like a pistol and a bulletproof vest that gives them an armor value of light for their chest, while their limbs have an armor value of unarmored 1. On some occasions, they will be given a little light helmet. As a side objective, groups of civilians have been captured and must be saved. Once the player starts attacking, the civilians will start to disperse, revealing that there were groups of recruits mixed in that will ambush the player. These groups will be seen being escorted in the streets on colony maps. The last enemy are deserters. These are the most well-equipped members of the rebels, focusing on mid to longer range combat. They are made up of ex-Helldivers, Super Earth Armed Forces members. They have an armor value of unarmored 2 for their limbs and light for their chest and head. They carry an automatic rifle and a sidearm, switching to their pistol when they need to reload. They use red smoke grenades to help them create more distance and shroud other enemies. The reason I chose red is so it doesn't get mixed up with player smoke grenades. I wanted to bring in the concept that with different planets, these guys will have camo that is the planet's respective colors, so white for ice planets and red for sand planets. They call in reinforcements by setting off a pre-recorded Howler cry. Now, these guys aren't super hard by any means. They are quite easy to kill, mostly relying on ambushing the player or killing them from longer distances. But that changes when we bring in the enemy, who is the name for this faction. The Wardog is another alien species, which is based off modern-day baboons. These guys come from a planet that's much larger than Earth and has a way stronger gravity than Earth, having them to evolve thicker bones and stronger muscles just to live on their planet. The rebels abducted the species, giving them minor augmentations to increase adrenaline and aggression. And now that they're off their original planet, they become much faster due to the less dense and strong gravity that are on super Earth claimed planets, as they are supposed to still be able to support human life. These guys are strong and fast, and they will try and close the distance with the player trying to attack close. However, their major drawback is that they have an armor value of light penetration, as their dense muscles and thick bones can only get you so far. They make it up with having a bit more health, as they are intended to be the muscle of the group. They fill the role of Devastators and Overseers, having more in common with Warriors from the Bug Front, as they are both primarily light penetration. Now we can move into some of the heavier enemies like the Howler, which I brought up before, which in my opinion has gotten a bit of a glow up. Those from my last video basically already know this. It seems like a lot of you guys really liked the Howler. Even after losing limbs, Wardogs still have their uses, having lost limbs replaced with some upgrades. Howlers are the Wardog solution for Berserkers from the bot front. They have an armor penetration of medium and light, as their chest, head, left leg have an repurposed pelican armor grafted onto them. Barely considered alive, these guys can spawn near and inside side objectives, giving solo divers a real scare, gonna make them shit their pants. They stand up, jittering their head on their own. The player needs to crouch or go prone to not provoke it, but once it goes aggro, it will let out a howl that will alert for reinforcements. This can be stopped by shooting it in its face, having it charge at the player instead. Once you put it down, it has a rare chance of having the prods on its back shoot into its spinal cord and send a shitload of electricity, giving it around 10 to 12 seconds to attack the player. This makes the Howler the deadliest force for those seconds. It's practically unstoppable, as shooting its limbs off won't stop it, unlike other enemies. Yeah, you might be thinking, he seems like a pain in the butt to fight. Why would I want to fight this guy? To make it not too unfair, there are very easy ways to take care of it. Before fighting, you can focus on using grenades to kill it, as if it doesn't have its legs, it won't be able to come back. I know bugs can still attack you if you shoot off their hind legs, but I don't think it would work for this enemy due to their size. I feel like the hitbox would... They're not big enough to constitute that ability. The same goes for when it comes back to life. A high damage, medium permanent weapon can take these guys out, so your standard machine gun should do the trick, but you're going to want to create constant distance when you're attacking it, as it will keep on charging at you no matter the damage. I imagine that stunning it really doesn't work, so your concussive liberator and your other weapons won't really do much. So either you have to run away and just stem for your life and just hope it dies quickly, or just when in doubt, throw a 500 on him. Next is an improved version of a previous enemy I made, the Taurus Mule. In my previous video, I came up with the Hound Riders. I've split up the idea into two enemies, as it helps create more tension on the battlefield. The Taurus Mule is a mule that is used by the rebels to transport supplies like food, ammo, to different encampments, also being dropped into firefights to help resupply themselves. It is always escorted by Grunts and Wardogs due to the important cargo that it's carrying. The enemy itself isn't too dangerous. It's the male version of an alien species that has evolved a similar niche to hippos. Its jaw is quite strong, enough to bite straight through the player, and has an armor value of light penetration, same reason as the Wardogs. Thick bones, dense muscles, they can really only do so much. For compensation, they are given ballistic armor under their supply bags that they're carrying, giving their torso, which is their center of mass, a armor rating of medium penetration. When the Grunts run low on ammo, they can go to the mule and replace their ammo for a different type, like fire breath or stun rounds. However, they won't be able to do this if the mule is killed. I thought the idea of having there be an enemy that on its own isn't very hard, it's very big, it's a little bit tanky for health, but it doesn't run too fast. So on its own, it's not too hard, but when it's in larger groups, it becomes just a source of tension. I wanted there to be enemies that have different ammo types, because I think that adds a lot more tension to these big fights. Could they get annoying? I do think so. So I think fire-based rounds should be a little bit less rare. I think stun ones should just maybe slow the player ever so slightly. And because they're ranged ones, you won't need to worry about the same issue that happens with the Predator strain, where you get spat at and you're getting just hoarded by a bunch of close-up melee guys. So I feel like this is a little bit more balanced way to have more interesting and dynamic fights. Now, I'll keep this one short, as it's just a slight variant. With the increase in higher difficulties, Wardogs will now spawn in with armor covering their chest and thighs. With an armor value of medium penetration, this means Wardogs will last a little bit longer on the battlefield and become a little bit harder to deal with. However, their back, heads, shins, and arms are still very exposed, allowing for light penetration weapons to still deal with them pretty easily. Just like Overseer armor, if you deal enough damage to their chest and thighs, it will just break off, exposing their lovely little fleshy bits. So just go ham. Now, onto the other half of the enemies that got split. The mules are the male version of this alien species. That is because the females are turned into brick shithouses. The armored Taurus, the species, has a case of sexual dimorphism, which is where the sexes develop changes for different reasonings. The females are much larger, as I see them spending most of their time protecting their young from predators. These ladies are covered in heavy-duty ballistic armor and repurposed plating from super destroyers. This gives them an armor rating of heavy penetration as well as medium penetration. This is where the jockey comes back, where he and another prisoner rise on top of the armored Taurus. One is controlling and steering the beast, while the other is using a mounted belt-fed light machine gun, similar to the Stalwart, to shoot at the player. The armored Taurus will run near the player trying to trample them. If they miss, the armed Grunt in the back will try firing at the player. However, when they're trying to steer back around, the armed Grunt won't be able to get a good shot at him, only being able to shoot the player when they run past him and is in front of the player. An easy solution to do with these guys is to kill the Grunts on top, but you'll need to act quickly, as once the Grunts are killed, the Taurus will try to run away, not wanting to fight you. If it does get away and you let your morality win over, it will come back with a group of Wardogs and a new jockey that is carrying an expendable anti-tank. So, you are forced to kill it, or you have it come back with more difficult enemies. Morality will get you killed, brother. Now, onto another enemy. I didn't really know where I should put this guy, because I had so many conflicting ideas for him. But I think I'm at a stage where I'm happy with how he is. The Veteran, previously called the Sharpshooter, was intended to be Super Earth's equivalent to Halo Spartans, but due to the requirements to be accepted into the program and the cost to make the armor, the program was canned. The Wardogs were able to steal the unused units and grafted veterans and any other well-equipped soldiers into these armors. These guys are hard to make and are by far one of the most valuable units that they have, so being used as snipers to help from afar. They use a rejected anti-tank rifle to destroy vehicles and players. The anti-tank rifle was rejected due to its higher recoil. As of the making of this video, they released a war bond with a rifle that has that exact gimmick. So I guess, yeah, Super Earth does not care about recoil. That's terrible. I've had this script written for ages. Anyway, back on track. Before firing, it will create a sniper glare to alert the player of its position, and it will also create a very noticeable laser dot on the sod that's in its line of sight. Players can dodge the round by diving to the side and taking cover. However, here's the little thing to make this guy a little bit more annoying. Once spotted, it will try to reposition itself. You can use turrets to coax it out and fire, giving away its position. The Veteran has quite the varied armor value. It has an armor value of heavy, medium, and light penetration, having medium thighs, upper arms, and the majority of chest and head, while the neck and the center chest plate as well as the hip guards are heavy armor. The heavy armor can break off like Overseer armor after considerable damage. When it runs out of ammo, it will charge at the players, moving to more melee focused combat. Its shins and forearms are light penetration, allowing light weapons to still have a chance to deal with this. Arc-based weapons can stun them for a brief second, dealing a little bit extra damage. Same goes for arc-based stratagems. The Veteran has gone through some of the biggest design changes from this whole project. I will talk about the designs later on. Figuring out and balancing the enemy was really hard, but it was also very fun. They're considered a side objective for the player to deal with. Just like Deserters, I think for different maps they can swap out their ghillie suit for an appropriate camo covering. On sand-based planets, they drop their ghillie suit and maybe have a camo-based cloth on top. Or maybe it's just a different colored ghillie suit. Whatever works. Another enemy, which is quite large, the Snatcher, is a large alien animal that has evolved similar traits to bats. However, they are much larger. They have an armor value of light penetration. They are by far one of the larger enemies of this faction when you compare them to Wardogs and the Armored Taurus. They circle large areas of the map, casting a shadow underneath the player, alerting them of their position. They will dive down and grab the player, that's why they're called Snatchers, and fly up to then drop them. To prevent this from being too annoying for players, players can dive out of the way of the dodge, which will have them slam into the ground, which allows you to shoot them a lot more. If you are grabbed, other players can shoot it enough to where it will drop you at a safer height. If the player shoots it long enough in the air, it will slowly but surely drop down in elevation, making it easier for other players to deal with them. For the final enemy, this also follows a lot of issues that I've faced with the Veteran when it comes to armor value. This is the Titan enemy, the Boom Gullet. Still not 100% on the name, but it works for now. The Boom Gullet is a huge ape that comes from the same planet as Wardogs. However, instead of staying to a smaller size, they've evolved to become large units of this planet. They're just as big or ever so slightly smaller than Bile Titans. This species uses its large frame to intimidate other predators. This guy is clearly a nod to a very specific kaiju. It's very obvious because if I'm going for a primitive ape motif for this whole faction, it would be kind of silly if I didn't make the giant Titan enemy just Space King Kong. It has an ability to where it can inflate an air sac which is in its throat, letting out a large scream. This will create a similar effect to the tremors on some planets with just a smaller radius. It still affects enemies, stunning them in place and slowing down the player. It has an armor value of light and medium pen, with its limbs and throat sac being light penetration, and its chest and head being medium penetration. If you blow up the throat sac, it will stop it from using the tremor attack, and it will expose the flesh, making it unarmored 1, becoming an easy weak spot to focus on. To compensate with the armor value, we'll need to increase the health to keep it balanced, while also keeping in mind its already existing abilities. It's slower than a Bile Titan, but faster than a Factory Strider. Because of its speed and size, it wouldn't need the additional protection that the Factory Strider has, which is anti-tank and heavy armor all over the body, including the mounted gun turrets on its chin and the huge cannon on its back. Factory Striders have a health pool of 10,000, while Bile Titans have a health pool of 6,500. So to keep it fair for the player, while still making it a noticeable threat to the battlefield, I see it either having 7,000 or maybe 8,000 for its total health. That number can always change. It's difficult to make actual health for these guys, as I don't really have a great way to test them to see if it's balanced. For its ranged attack, it will shove its hand down into the ground, leveraging all the dirt, gravel, and stones underneath and pulling them up. This will create this big radius of stone, gravel, falling down from the sky. People suggested that I give it a turret on its back or have enemies on it. The enemies one I'm not against, but the gun turrets I wasn't too much of a fan, as I felt like it was leaning too much into how Factory Striders work. My whole thought process for this entire faction is trying not to focus on repeating existing enemies. Of course, you're going to need your grunts, your heavier enemies, all that's understandable, but how they act and why they have these things, I have to keep in mind, so I'm not repeating already existing enemies and just giving them a skin. Before we move on to the environments that I've cooked up, I want to just talk about how I've improved on the designs for these enemies. Enemies like the Howler have been greatly improved with a very different silhouette, making them stand out to the other enemies that they're based off, Wardogs, allowing players to react and plan a lot better when they're in large fights. I'm happy with the veterans design. I posted some concept art and previous designs on YouTube, and one person brought up how it just kind of looks like a robot when the intention was it's supposed to be a man in a mech suit, well, a power armor suit. How much is still man? That's up for debate, but that stuck with me a bit, so I went back and started changing some of the proportions a bit more. I also went back and focused more onto the camo and sniper based hidden part of the enemy, as although it's still supposed to be a heavy hitter, I didn't want it to just be a smaller, thinner version of a Hulk, because that doesn't sound fun to fight. So having it rely most of its abilities on staying hidden and attacking from afar, while still being able to take a good couple hits, I think that creates a lot more tension. The boom gullet also had a bit of a redesign. From the very first video, I leaned away from your stereotypical large gorilla, which is a lot bigger, bulkier. It's kind of like a silverback. That's basically how every video game does big monkeys. So I thought I'd lean more into the skinnier gibbon look, having straight teeth and just a strange looking head, and have it not have a sloping forehead. For a design, it's alright, but as an enemy that you have to fight against, it has a lot of issues. It doesn't look like it can take a hitting. I feel like if I shoot it with a recoilless or an autocannon, it's gonna slump dead. If I shoot it in its ankles and knees, it looks like it's gonna topple over. I went back, reconsidered my thought process for this enemy. So I made it a lot chunkier, a lot thicker. I looked at other Titan enemies to see their silhouette. The majority of them focus on just being long, not really too wide. The only enemy that's really wide are Impalers, to make it stand out from just other designs for big giant ape kaiju. Removed its hair from its legs and arms, as well as its forehead. Evolution-wise, this is because a creature of this size really doesn't need this much hair, because it's just going to overheat, and that's just the worst way to die for animals these size. However, I still wanted to keep some hair because, I don't know about you, I don't want to fight an enemy with its ding-a-ling out. Back, shoulders, crotch covered in hair. The crest on their forehead is a sagittal crest, however, it looks a bit different than the normal ones. Sagittal crests are what most mammals and apes have evolved. It allows them to connect jaw muscles onto it, giving them a stronger bite force. The Wardogs also had a bit of a redesign. I moved away from the lighter colored, longer haired design, as I felt it looked too much like a werewolf or a capybara, and it wasn't really giving you the idea that it was based off baboons. Design wise, again, it's not bad, but it wasn't what I was going for, so I leaned more into the baboon idea. So I changed the orientation of the eyes, I changed the color of its fur, and I also gave it a little tail. I gave it a darker mane around its neck to make it look larger and more intimidating. I came up with an idea for a sub-faction which would help mix in the older design and the newer design. This would be the Alpha Wardog. This just follows just a normal Wardog, however it has a lot more health and it's armed with a belt-fed rifle, so reloading isn't really an issue because it just keeps on firing. The Alpha Wardog walks around with troops of other Wardogs. If you kill the Wardogs before itself, it will activate a rage mode where it will start beating you up with the rifle that it's carrying. I gave the Alpha Wardog longer, lighter hair, showing that when they hit puberty, they start to develop longer hair, and so that means that the majority of the Wardogs that you're fighting are adolescent teenagers, young adults. Now, I think I've yapped a lot more than I should have about this, so let's move back on to the topic at hand, the environments. The new environment that this faction brings in are prison planets, planets that have been repurposed to house dissidents and rebels. This comes with a new mission type where you need to reactivate the prison's defenses and fix the broken walls. You must reactivate the mounted turrets and throw down stratagems that are replacement walls. You throw down the walls just like how you throw down the nuke nurseries. You throw down a stratagem, and this big block falls down from the sky. Slowly but surely, a replacement wall will start rising up, so you need to defend the area so it can get up without interruptions. The wall-mounted turrets can only be activated by going inside and fixing the damage generator. So with this concept, I also wanted to take my spin at close quarters combat inside of buildings and see how it could work in Helldivers. Cells are full of angry grunts, and the second floor is littered with deserters. Because of the smaller environment, I don't see too many Wardogs being inside, due to Helldivers 2 AI being a bit iffy on smaller spaces. I don't see the inner prison being small either, but I can already imagine the Wardogs getting stuck inside of the corners for hallways. Once exploring the inside, you can access the emergency generators. Once turning them on, they will allow you to close off areas while opening up others, which will help you gather ammo, supplies, and other tools that can help you throughout the game. My only issue with this idea is how prison environments can be reworked for the other factions. For the Illuminate, I see it working because they focus on stealing civilians and repurposing them into voteless, so you're just going to have a reskinned voteless for these missions. However, bots and bug planets, I don't see too much. I feel like it would be a waste of materials for the bots. Bugs, maybe, but then that brings up the issue of the prisoners for this faction. Would they be on every prison, or would they all be dead? So, yeah, I feel like it could work, but I don't know. It brings up some issues that I'm not ready to talk about. If you have ideas, throw them in. For the time being, I think this is a great way to introduce close quarters combat while not being too different from how you play normally. The other mission I can imagine helping this faction stand out are destroy bunker missions. You are tasked to enter 3 secret bunkers, which may or may not have belonged to Super Earth before the Dissident invasion, which has now been taken over by the Wardogs. Your goal is destroying the bunkers and the rebels inside. Once entering the bunker, you will lose connection with your stratagems and reinforcements. However, in larger areas, there are plenty of ammo and supplies to help compensate the lack of resupply. Now, one comment I get constantly for this faction is, how do you explain why there are so many Wardogs and other enemies? Well, I brought up earlier that for the Grunts, statistically we're talking about trillions of these guys. Even if we take the lower percentage of 20 million, that's still a lot of guys, and they're filling out the numbers with more dissidents that are joining in and other alien wildlife. I also see this wildlife coming from very big planets, so although they don't have like very fast birth rates, they still have the numbers. This Super Earth bunker was kept a secret as they were trying to reverse engineer Illuminate technology. This was initially to try and reverse the voteless process. Of course, you're trying to stop your citizens from being zombies, but it also comes with some other benefits. The rebels have broken into these bunkers as they are trying their best to figure out how cloning works, as once they do, their whole fight for freedom becomes less of a tactician's game and more of a numbers game. So you need to activate the self-destruct and destroy the bunker, destroying all involvement of Super Earth testing. And of course, you know, we can't let the bad guys get more guys. Come on, guys. They're the bad guys. Don't look at the files or any of the test tubes. It's hard to stop the cloning process, guys. I did say previously that some of the issues with more close quarter combat and Helldivers are the AI. I feel like prisons work a lot better because they can be a lot larger, and it also still allows you to use your stratagems. Maybe not the destructive ones as much as you would want, but guns, turrets, revives, resupplies, they still work pretty well. The bunker is quite a very different way of playing, as I don't see it being too big. There are of course going to be large open areas because that's how Helldivers works, but I can already imagine small, narrower corridors, which I do think that could be an issue for some enemies. It is quite a different way of playing, as you can no longer rely on your stratagems or your resupply, and you must become more tactitional. I think it could be harder, but I can always imagine there being smaller changes. I think reviving can maybe work. Maybe just like on Super Destroyers, there are frozen supplies of Helldivers that you can come out of, so you're not just spectating your friend as they're getting a mission done. But I do want to keep the lack of stratagems as it helps create a lot more tension and forces the player to act differently. Prepare accordingly. Whether this works for how Helldivers is played, I think it might be a little too far, but this is all just a little what if. For the enemy camps, I imagine them coming out of repurposed above ground bunkers with a camo tarp over it. If you want to destroy the bunker, you'll need to destroy the blast door and then hit it again with either a recoilless or a stratagem. If you want to save your ammo, you can just open up the blast doors just by pressing the button, similarly to already existing bunkers and the stuff on Super Earth. Now, just because I want this to be a little bit harder, to stop players from just throwing in red stratagems, in these encampments there are caged civilians that need to be freed. You can free them by just setting off an explosion at the cage. So you're going to want to set those guys free, or if you want to lose, just a couple requisition slots. For deployment, this faction comes off Pelicans and a variant based off the Chinook aircraft. Grunts will be deployed from ziplines, and the aliens will be dropped from the nets below. Simply shooting off one of the helicopter propellers will take care of this big whirly bird. And that is everything I have been working on for a week. Sadly, I don't have any half-baked 3D models that I made on Blender without knowing how to use Blender to show off. But I would like to thank everyone who has helped me with this whole project so far. It's been insane. I've had a lot of fun with it, and seeing everybody's fan art and their own ideas for their own faction is incredible. It is insane. I love seeing people's creativity. This has honestly been a whole lot of fun, designing these guys, figuring out how they could work, and all the other ways to make this game more fun, honestly. This faction will never get added to Helldivers. Big surprise. What? Who said that? What? And I am fine with that. I never imagined it would be. I mean, like, did I predict two things now? Maybe. The mistake. Yeah, flesh mob more like. Having the ability to come back after death for a short amount of time. What? That would be too hard for an enemy. Let's give that to the player instead, which is still so cool. If they are ever going to take anything from this faction and repurpose it for the already existing ones, the things that I want them to focus on are a sniper-based enemy. I think the veteran can very easily get reworked into a automaton variant. I think that could be nice. I think giving either the Illuminate altering camo that was suggested earlier this week from a guy on Reddit, which is insane. I'm glad other people are thinking on ways to make the enemies a lot harder. I think it works very well for the automatons. Bugs don't really need them, and the Illuminate really aren't focused on ambushing or strategy, honestly. They mostly focus on just sending out the guys and doing all the damage. I think rebels can work in Helldivers, but whether a faction on their own could work, I don't know. I added the alien wildlife to help distinguish this faction from the other ones, as I feel like if it only really focused on the rebellion, I think it could lean a little too hard into bot territory. I feel like I'm actually developing a style of my own. I am very proud of how all these guys have turned out. I do think some of them will obviously be changed into the future, because like I said in the very first video for these guys, I'm probably going to change them like 100 times before I'm happy with them. Unlike Arrowhead, I don't have like a whole art department team with experience for these guys, so it's just trial and error. I think it's fun. You guys should all give it a try. I don't know if I'll make another video on these guys. I did say in my last one that I would want to focus on a video for Trench Crusade because I like their designs and I think it would be fun to maybe do my own, but the last video I made got a lot of attention and I felt like I could improve it greatly. Now that I've done this one, I don't think there's anything that I can really add. I've spent the good half of my year working on these little guys in my spare time. And I'm so glad people enjoyed seeing my work, but I think I've had enough drawing baboon men and big, scary bat monsters. I think this is probably the end for this little faction. The only thing I can see me doing with them is creating a 3D model for a couple of them. I don't know what I'll do for the future uploads, but I'll hope you guys stick around. I'll end this video on a lighter note from a pretty respected man in the community, with also some of your guys' fan art. That's all I've got to say. Goodbye, everybody.
We interrupt your everyday activities for a very important democratic communique from me, John Helldiver. This is on behalf of Sladen, one of democracy's finest heroes, to you, my finest band of Helldivers. Now, I don't need to be the one to tell you this, but I hope that my John Helldivery presence lends some gravity to this truth. There is a new threat to manage democracy. But remember, the Wardog Horde are nothing more than a bunch of pro-anarchists. Despicable! Anarchy is the opposite of democracy. Can you imagine if we were spreading managed anarchy? First of all, that makes no damn sense. Managed anarchy, that's an oxymoron, just like the Wardogs are. A bunch of oxymorons! Can you imagine if we were just reinforcing willy-nilly? If stratagems had no cooldowns? If elections were not managed? Ugh! Makes my blood boil just thinking about it. These Wardogs, this horde of Wardogs, has absolutely no chance to win the battle for democracy. Not when the fine Helldivers like you are standing there, toe to toe, helmet to helmet, liberator penetrator to liberator penetrator. The Wardog Horde has no chance. Remember your training. Remember the faces of the children at Vernon Wells. Remember all of those beautiful Helldiver souls we lost at Malevolent Creek, and allow this to fan the flames of your own democratic bonfire that I know burns brightly inside your breast. Good luck, Helldivers. May liberty guide your victory. And remember, when you walked upon the sands of a distant planet, and you saw two sets of footsteps, I was there next to you. When you saw one set of footsteps, I threw you on my back like a portable hell bomb. And when you saw no sets of footsteps and just a big crater, I don't know, I probably threw a 500k eagle and hoped for the best. Freedom conquers all, Helldivers. Fight the Wardog Horde and know that your Uncle John is with you. Liberty guide your step, and liberty guide your victory.